Dear colleagues, gentlemen, dear friends, if you smell the scent of honest parliamentary work, then it's quite logical because we only left this place some hours ago. We had our budget discussions and they ended at, look at the, it ended at 4:30. So we just stopped to welcome you. That was the only reason that we are not debating until now. It's a great honor for me to welcome you to the Belgian Parliament. It's a rare privilege to say, to be joined by such a distinguished group of people that we all know are the most important in a country, the presidents of a parliament. We are gathered here today to mark the 7th anniversary of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. It is fitting that we do so in Brussels. It's a crossroad of European and international diplomacy, home to NATO's headquarters and capital of one of its 12 founding members. I will now continue my speech in Dutch, so please feel free to turn on your listening devices. You have the translation in French on number 1, Dutch on number 2, but I hope I don't be translated into Dutch. And English is number 3. Geachte collega's, excellenties, vrienden.
Dear colleagues, excellencies, dear friends, you are here today in Brussels, and I'm very pleased to have this summit meeting here in Brussels, right a few days before the NATO summit that will take place in The Hague. I think that it is paramount for us to hear the positions of the executive power, but also that of the legislative power. We, of course, in an ideal world, this is the premise inter pares, and I think that it is important for us to be here today as parliamentarians, and it's true that we do not have the same media coverage as the executive power. However, we do play a very important role, and I do hope that today we will be able to contribute to the debate, and I hope that we will have an honest debate as to the challenges that we must face. There are many challenges. Europe, as you know, has a conflict at its border, and I would like to welcome our Ukrainian friends here in this chamber, and we are here to support them in these circumstances. But the world is changing. It is changing very rapidly. Technology is also changing things. Our society must reform itself, and we see all of these geopolitical developments also. We have the feeling that this is happening at a rampant speed. War in 2025, and as a matter of fact, this is really at the heart of our debates, and this war in 2025 is completely different compared to the conflict that we knew when NATO was created 70 years ago. Drones, cyber threats, cyber war, all of this hybrid war also constitutes really what we need to fight. And in 1948, this did not exist, quite simply. It is therefore paramount to be able to count on our friends, to be sure that we are not alone to face these challenges, to know that other nations are here to support us. Of course, we need to respect each other's autonomy and differences. This is really what is at the heart of our democracy, the respect of our mutual differences. And this will enable us to stand together. I am pleased and honored to be the president of the House of Representatives of Belgium, and it is my pleasure to welcome you here, and I do hope that we will have an interesting and productive exchange of views. We will look back on 70 years of collective defense in the Western world, and it's true that we need to prepare for the peace that will come for the 70 years to come. And on these words, I would now like to give the floor to Vincent Blondel. Thank you very much.
Mesdames,
Ladies and gentlemen, speakers, presidents, parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to welcome you here in this chamber with my colleague Peter de Roover. And I would really like to point out that he is very resistant to fatigue. It's true that he chaired this chamber up until 4:30 in the morning today, and also he is father of a 1-week-old baby. So congratulations to him. And welcome to Marcel. And we do hope that we will leave him a wonderful world. Now, I would also like to thank the NPA and his president, Marcos Perestrelos, as well as all of the members of the NPA who took the initiative to organize the NPA summit to commemorate the 70th anniversary of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. And this really shows the parliamentary aspect of our assembly and our alliance. I am pleased to see so many familiar faces in the room. As you know, I am the president of the Senate, and I'm also a university professor, as well as the president of the Commission for Science and Technology here at the Senate. Now, during our session in Dayton a few weeks ago in the U.S., we adopted a declaration that invited all the governments to enhance deterrence and defense in the NATO nations.
raising deterrence to a higher level requires significant financial resources. In its declaration, the NATO Parliamentary Assembly calls on government to step up their contributions to transatlantic security so that each and every country fully assumes its share of responsibility and accelerates investment in defense. We all know that this is not easy. Just a few hours ago, this chamber was the scene of a particularly heated parliamentary debate on Belgian budget, including its defense budget. These discussions, often long and intense, also take place in your assemblies. They illustrate very well the difficulty our state face, that of strengthening our collective security by investing in defense, without neglecting sectors that are essential to the proper functioning of our society. Finding the right balance is a delicate task. But when I think of this delicate balance to be found, I think of my recent exchange with a participant in the Balkan War, who said to me in Dayton a few weeks ago, "You know, Vincent, without security and defense, there is not much left. Education, health, culture, justice. Without security, there is not much left of any of that." And when I think about this delicate balance, I also think about this visit that several of us made to Kiev in Ukraine a few weeks ago at the invitation of our dear colleague and friend, Ruslan Stefanchuk, to commemorate the atrocity committed by Russian troops in Bucha. That was a moving moment to whoever participated in this commemoration. And such a visit helps us to realize what we are fighting for. Let us never forget that NATO's strength lies above all in its fundamental values. Our collective defense finds its meaning in the protection of freedom, democracy, human rights, and rule of law. It is also this determination that strengthens our resolute resolve to provide unwavering support to Ukraine. Our meeting today and next week's summit in The Hague must send a strong political message that our democracies are determined to defend themselves together, as with the Belgian motto that you can see there on the back, l'union fait la force, Eendracht maakt macht. Unity, trust, and dialogue must remain the pillars of our collective actions. It is my hope that this day will be one of renewed commitment to security based on credible deterrence, but also on dialogue and prevention. We thank you all very much for coming to Brussels and to Belgium, and I hope you'll have an interesting morning and an interesting day here in Belgium. Thank you for your attention.
Mesdames,
Speakers, presidents, excellencies, dear colleagues, I would like to very warmly thank Presidents Rouver and Blondel for hosting us for the Parliamentary Summit that commemorates the 70th anniversary of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. In summer of 1955, our founding fathers gathered around a firm belief that the commitment of NATO nations to collective defense must be grounded in the democratic foundations of the alliance and must also be rooted and count on the support of our citizens via their elected representatives. For 70 years now, the Assembly gives voice to the allied population and therefore contributes to reinforce the alliance. For 70 years, we have shown our citizens that NATO is the keystone of security in Europe and in North America.
as allied heads of state and government prepare to meet in The Hague next week, we must affirm our Parliament's support for an ambitious agenda to strengthen NATO. First, we must step up to face the unprecedented threats and challenges, the direct threats of Russia and terrorism, the rising instability in our neighborhood, and the menace to the rules-based order and our democratic way of life. We must adopt a new, robust defense investment plan, urgently develop our industrial base, and take back the lead in new technologies. As we do this, we must shift and rebalance the transatlantic burden and responsibilities within NATO. Our parliaments must let our governments know that we support increased defense spending, that we support a stronger and fairer NATO. The second priority is that we must increase our resilience and better count the autocrats' hybrid warfare and their challenge to the international order. This is why our Assembly will continue to press for the establishment of a Center for Democratic Resilience at NATO headquarters. I welcome that allies are considering including spending on resilience in the defense-related financial commitment of the new defense investment plan. Third, allies must continue to make clear they stand with Ukraine, unwavering in their support for Ukraine's democracy, independence, sovereignty, territorial integrity, right to self-defense and self-determination, including NATO membership, unwavering in the principles this alliance stands for, and unwavering in their commitment to bring peace through strength. Colleagues, our alliance of democracies must continue to follow three cardinal virtues: clarity, unity, and strength. We must be guided by the moral clarity of our shared democratic values. We must act in unity to underpin our credibility, and we must bring to bear our collective strengths to the threats and challenges neither North America or Europe can solve alone. Then I have no doubt we will succeed and continue to protect the security of the 1 billion citizens living under NATO's roof. Thank you very much for your attention. Welcome to our Speaker Summit, and I hope to hear your remarks. I would now like to invite Ruslan Stefanchuk, Speaker of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, to address the summit.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, honorable speakers, members of parliament, dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to address the NATO Parliamentary Summit, to speak to friends, allies, and partners. Partners who are united not only by collective security, but also by values and principles. Today I want to speak about these principles and values. Today I want to be very straightforward and clear. I want to speak about the reasons why Ukraine must become a NATO member. Reason one, Ukraine must become NATO member to protect itself. The message is very simple as it gets. If Russia cannot stop Ukraine from joining NATO, it may also be able to block its EU integration. Step by step, Russia will try to seize all of Ukraine. And believe me, Russia will not stop on the western borders of Ukraine. It will move further. Reason two, Ukraine as a member will strengthen NATO. The Ukrainian army is the strongest and the most experienced army in Europe. Armed force of Ukraine fight with NATO weapons according to NATO standards and defend the east flank of NATO. Dear friend, if this is not a NATO army, then what is? Reason three, the path to NATO stimulates change in Ukraine. I am talking about the strengthening the democracy, civilian control of the military, and legal reforms. To be a member of NATO means to be a democratic country, to have the rules of law, to respect human rights. Reason four, can you believe that up to 86% of Ukrainian citizens support NATO memberships. Only 4 or 5% are against. The people have spoken. Reason 5. When Ukraine becomes a NATO member, the axis of evil will see that aggressor does not pay off. They will see that democracy is stronger than tyranny. These are 5 absolutely clear reasons why Ukraine must become a NATO member. I know that some members do not want Ukraine to join NATO. Stop being afraid of Putin, just like Ukraine is not afraid of Putin. And we are not even members of the strongest defense alliance in the world. Putin must not have a veto right in NATO. NATO must not tolerate that Russia influence who can become a NATO member and who cannot. Putin will draw red lines only where he is allowed to. And Ukraine proves every day that red lines exist only in Putin's head. We can't let these red lines get into our head. Dear Mr. President, dear colleagues, Mr. President, yesterday you said that the war in Ukraine is the most serious test for NATO. And I really want NATO to pass this test. NATO was born as a response to a totalitarian threat. Now, this threat is stronger than ever. So, dear NATO, become who you were born to be. Forget the doubts. Forget the fears. Forget the self-imposed red lines. Send a strong message to Moscow dictator and other dictators around the world. Dear friends, Ukraine wants to become a member of the alliance. Ukraine wants peace just as every NATO country wants peace. A just and lasting peace. But let's be clear, peace cannot be traded for the one's own land or one's own people. Tell me, is anyone here prepared to exchange peace for their own citizens, for their own territory? We will never recognize the temporary occupied territory as part of Russia. We will not allow Russia to meddle in our domestic policy. We will not tolerate Russia dictating us the choice of our foreign policy. We are ready for a full and unconditional ceasefire, but our common enemy does not want peace. I am grateful to all of you for the support already provided. But now is not the time for hesitation. It's time for strong decisions. It's time for resolute actions. With your support, we will end this war. Together with you, we will open a new chapter, a chapter of hope, recovery, and justice. Thank you for your attention, and Slava Ukraini!
Thank you. Thank you to Speaker Stefanchuk and the Ukrainian delegation for joining us. We stand by you in your fight for freedom and democracy since day one of the invasion. Thank you. Thank you, Stefan. And I would like to invite Gordon Jandrokovic, Speaker of the House of Representatives of Croatia, to address the summit. Mr. Speaker, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. NATO's Parliamentary Assembly represents the democratic heart of our alliance. It is not only a forum for dialogue, which help us shape policies that impact the security of our nations. It also plays a crucial role in bridging the gap between military strategy and public accountability. By gathering at this summit, I believe we demonstrate the dedication of our national parliaments to contribute, to continue building NATO as a strong, cohesive and forward-thinking alliance. An alliance that is ready to act promptly, decisively and collectively. To do so, we must continue adapting to new realities, geostrategic, military and technological. By doing that, we can ensure that our societies and our defenses are ready to face the next generation of threats. Dear colleagues, challenging times call for decisive actions. We must remain committed to strengthening our alliance and stand as united and resolute as ever. It is highly likely that the global security environment will keep getting more complex and more demanding. The conflict between Israel and Iran is just another proof of how fragile our world is. We call for restraint. Diplomacy still deserves a fair chance, no matter how difficult the situation. This also includes more hard work by the International Atomic Energy Agency regarding Iranian nuclear program, because this is a legitimate source of concern. At the same time, we cannot allow this conflict to distract us from persistent support to Ukraine in all aspects necessary. We must remain firmly with Ukraine. After all, in doing so, we are defending our values, the fundamental principles of international law and the rules-based order. Dear colleagues, nothing is more valuable than the security of our citizens. This line should really resound today more than ever, because the stakes are too high to ignore. The cost of our security today, both collective and national, is not seen only in how much we will allocate for defense. It will also be reflected in the compromises our societies are willing to make in order to live in a safer environment. As politicians, we have the duty to communicate and explain the necessity of increased defense funding, and even more importantly, to speak openly about what might be lost if we fail to act. Croatia is fully aware that European allies must increase their defense investments. That is why our national defense budget rose by nearly 200% since 2016. That is why we will support efforts to reach an agreement at the upcoming summit to allocate 5% of GDP to defense-related spending by 2032. From our perspective, stronger national defense capabilities and more transatlantic cohesion should go hand in hand. And if we are all equally on board, that is the strongest deterrent possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would now like to invite Fernando Gutierrez, head of the Spanish delegation, to address the summit.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Europe is immersed in a process of awakening to the reality of defense demands following the sustained period of consumption of the peace dividends experienced on the continent once the dramatic effects of the Second World War were overcome. It was at the beginning of the 21st century when the invasion and occupation of the Crimean Peninsula by the Russian Federation in 2014 and the subsequent invasion of Ukraine, also by the Russian Federation in a conflict that does not seem to find its way to peace, have caused a radical change in the positions of all countries of the international community, both in the European Union and the Atlantic Alliance, as well as the United Nations Organization. In these circumstances, we must link the budget increase in defense investments to the defense planning process, so that the capabilities to be obtained by the armed forces for the performance of their duties come from that planning process in which those responsible for the armed forces determine the capabilities with which they must be provided. We support the alignment of the capabilities to be prioritized by the European Union in its white paper on rearm and preparation, and the target capabilities agreed upon by our defense ministers at their meeting on June the 5th. There is a common tendency between both organizations to identify these capabilities, which should be used as a vehicle of our cohesion and strengthening, in the understanding that our union and our cohesion are the main resources of our strength. Our defense industry must provide a response to the shortcomings and needs expressed by the members of our armed forces, who are the ones who, if necessary, will have to use the resources provided to them in order to guarantee our security. Defense is a state policy that must enjoy the consensus and support of the main political parties in all countries. No government should subject the capabilities it provides to our armed forces to ideological motivations, but rather purely to technical ones. As parliamentarians, we have the responsibility to inform our citizens and our governments of the need we perceive to unite the efforts of all allies in order, together, to provide the armed forces of our countries with the capabilities they must have to guarantee the defense and deterrence of our alliance against any external enemy that eventually might try to test the consistency of our unity and our strength. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. I would now like to invite Lori Hussar, Speaker of the Riigikogu of Estonia, to address the summit.
President, dear colleagues, dear friends, and most of all, dear allies. What a great word, ally. It's coming from Latin, alligare, and means to bind. And this is all about what NATO is, to bind us. Let me be clear. Russia remains the most significant direct and universal threat to the Allied security. It is not a threat to the eastern flank only, but 360 degrees. Its militant groups are being formed in Sahel. It strives for strategic goals in Arctic, and its shadow fleet navigates through our waters untouched. Therefore, we are counting on the NATO summit to make bold decisions that will ensure the long-term security of our transatlantic unity. Estonia has committed to raising its defense spending to 5.4% between 2026 and 2029. We support the proposed NATO 5% target, and we think it should be reached by 2030. We need to set a quicker deadline for raising defense spending on the required level so that we can implement the agreed upon NATO defense plans and be prepared to defend if necessary. We should focus not just on spending more on defense, but on spending smarter and more efficiently. That means removing the remaining defense trade barriers between the allies. Major joint procurements, particularly in critical capabilities like ammunition and air and missile defense, will strengthen our collective security and boost growth and innovation in our defense industries. Dear colleagues, last year in Washington, the allies agreed that Ukraine's path to NATO is irreversible, and the NATO door must remain open to all those who share our values and contribute to the security of the Euro-Atlantic area. We continue to firmly believe that Ukraine's accession to NATO is the most reliable security guarantee for both Ukraine and the entire alliance. and think that an upcoming NATO summit in Hague should send a strong message of a long-term political and military support for Ukraine. Estonia remains committed to contributing 0.25% of GDP yearly to Ukraine military support, and we call all the allies to increase their respective military support to Ukraine. Dear allies, at this critical time, we must reaffirm our commitment to unity, strength, and to enduring transatlantic bond. The global landscape demands that we act, not with hesitation, but with purpose. It's time to invest in our shared future, to continue providing the support Ukraine needs, and to strengthen our defense capabilities for the challenges ahead. Together, we can ensure peace and stability, not just for today, but for generations to come. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to invite now Congressman Neil Dunn of the United States Congress. Neil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning to everyone. It's an honor to be here with all of our NATO allies and partners, speaking on behalf of House Speaker Mike Johnson, who graciously asked me to represent him today. And thank you to all the delegates, officials, national security experts, and guests who have traveled from around the world to be with us here today. My message, Speaker Johnson's message, is very simple. America remains steadfast in our commitment to the NATO alliance, to strengthening our alliance to achieve peace through strength. It tells the NATO leadership are aligned, and we are encouraging a new and higher defense spending commitment for all allied governments, including America. We absolutely must modernize and grow our collective defense capabilities. We must bridge the existing capability gaps. This means a much more robust defense industrial base on both sides of the Atlantic. Increasing defense investments to 5% of GDP is crucial. The U.S. is currently at 3.4%, and I believe we can reach 5% very promptly. During the Reagan years, we were at 6%. During the Nixon and Ford years, we were at 8%. We know the way to get there. I'm encouraged by the ongoing discussions between the United States and our NATO allies as we strengthen our commitments to our common defense of the free world. For the first time since our unanimous 2014 pledge, almost all NATO allies will reach our initial spending commitment of 2% of GDP on defense this year. This news is overdue, but it is great news. It is vital that we continue to work on rebuilding the U.S. and European defense industrial bases. This includes achieving new NATO capability targets to meet new technological and strategic threats to Europe and North America. Our Economics and Security Committee this last year unanimously approved a report that expanded on the NATO allies' need to focus on threats and capabilities in the Indo-Pacific Asian theater as well. This year, I presented our report at the Dayton Summit, which discusses the current shortcomings of the defense industry in North America and in Europe and ways to improve those. We must strengthen our defense industrial base. Our freedom and freedom throughout the world depends on us working together to bolster our defense and cyber industries, ensure we can respond effectively to a wide range of brand new security threats. We must maintain a technological edge and ensure the capacity for rapid and distant mobilization in times of crisis. Russia has significantly reconstituted its threat to Europe and Africa in the near term, and so does China. Fostering an industrial partnership between the U.S. and Europe is key. Enhanced NATO-EU coordination can ensure greater efficiency in defense spending and help ensure higher levels of interoperability. Finally, we must work together to better standardize wherever possible to foster flexibility, improve interoperability. Stating that if we want war, so I'm going to quote Secretary General Rutte. He stated that if we want peace, we must accept that we must prepare for war. And the Romans said this 2,000 years ago, si vis pacem para bellum. The only thing more expensive than peace is war. I look forward to a continued dialogue, enduring alliance and friendship committed to peace, democracy, and our collective defense. We're stronger together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman. I would now like to invite Jussi Halla-aho, Speaker of the Eduskunta of Finland.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues and allies. As a direct consequence of the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, we made a swift and almost unanimous decision to apply for membership in the alliance. We have now been a member for 2 years, and I wish to thank you all both for the support during the accession process and for the cooperation as we have been adjusting our legislation and practices to the new situation. Finland seeks to be an active member and a strong contributor to the collective deterrence. The willingness of the Finnish population to defend our land and the alliance is high. 20,000 conscripts complete basic training each year. The size of our reserve with a wartime assignment is close to 300,000, and the entire trained reserve is close to 1 million. As a demonstration of our commitment, the Finnish Defence Force has already participated in NATO-led air patrolling in Southeast Europe and Iceland, and maritime patrolling in the Baltic Sea. Because of our geographic location, we understand very well the threat that Russia poses to its neighbors, to Europe, and to the world order. We have already decided to raise our national defense expenditure from the current 2.5% to at least 3% by 2029, and we are prepared to support a 5% NATO level, despite the challenges that we have with our public finances. Finland, together with the other Nordic and Baltic countries and Poland, is among the biggest donors of military material to Ukraine relative to our size. We urge all members to contribute more, especially the big countries, also those countries that are further away from Russian borders, and also those countries that themselves benefited from European solidarity during our earlier crises, the financial crisis, the immigration crisis, and the pandemic. The consequences of a Russian victory in Ukraine will be costlier than defeating Russia in Ukraine. Russia has vast resources, but they are not limitless. Chairman, finally, I wish to inform you that yesterday the Finnish Parliament made the historic decision that Finland will withdraw from the Ottawa Convention and reintroduce anti-personnel landmines to our defensive toolkit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. J'invite Natalia Pouzyrev, Présidente.
I now give the floor to Natalia Pouzyrev, Speaker for France.
Distinguished President, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to convey the regrets of the President of the National Assembly, Mrs. Braun-Pivet, unable to join us today and whose voice I will carry today. The regression in international law and the trend that we have seen with more and more attraction towards authoritarian power means that we need to fight for democracy and to intensify our exchanges with our partners. In this light, parliamentary democracy plays an essential role, and this is now a very concrete task with the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. We need to have at heart the goal of re-establishing trust of public opinion towards our institutions. We need to convince our populations of the need to increase defense spending and to preserve a strong transatlantic bond. We are determined to ensure that the NATO Parliamentary Assembly play fully its part. During the spring session in Dayton, parliamentarians adopted unanimously 2 statements inviting heads of state and government of the alliance nations to take strong measures to strengthen NATO while assuring that deterrence and defense be fairly spread among members. The second statement is a call for an increase in the diplomatic, military, financial assistance to Ukraine and a tightening of sanctions against Moscow to show the essential nature of our support to Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you very much, Natalia. I would now like to give the floor to Nicole Duraton from the French Senate. Thank you very much, Mr. President, distinguished presidents, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. The President of the French Senate, Gérard Larcher, is unable to join us, but I'm grateful for the honor of addressing you today at this key juncture for our alliance. In view of the growing threats and the extended instability on our continent caused by Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, it is more crucial than ever for NATO to demonstrate its unity. Our cohesion is the basis for our alliance's credibility and effectiveness. The conflict in Ukraine, a tragic reminder of the brutality of geopolitics, calls for our support to Ukraine to remain total, determined, and lasting. Our support is not only a moral necessity, it is also an investment in the security of the Euro-Atlantic area. In this context, it is essential to strengthen the alliance's European pillar as a stronger, more autonomous, and more coherent European defense will make a decisive contribution to our collective security. Strengthening the European pillar also involves fully taking on the challenges we are facing. An increase in our defense spending is unavoidable to reach the capability targets agreed by our defense ministers last May, and thereby ensure our security. This is not about embarking on an arms race, but about meeting the challenges of our times, defending our values, our borders, and our peoples. Let us rise to these challenges and meet the expectations of our fellow citizens. Thank you. Thank you, Nicole.
I would like to invite Georgios Georgantas, Vice President of the Hellenic Parliament, to address the summit.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, Excellencies, it is a great honor to address in this distinguished gathering on the 70th anniversary of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. This milestone highlights the enduring importance of parliamentary diplomacy as a cornerstone of our transatlantic community. The NATO Parliamentary Assembly gives voice to our citizens in the security dialogue, ensuring democratic legitimacy, transparency in alliance decisions. In an era of complex global challenges and geopolitical uncertainty, the contribution of parliaments to foreign and defense policy is more crucial than ever. Greece, as one of NATO's oldest members, remains unwavering in its commitment to the principles upon which the alliance was founded. We are proud to serve as a strategic pillar on NATO's southeastern flank, a gateway of stability in the Balkans, the Eastern Mediterranean, and beyond. Our contribution span NATO missions from Operation Sea Guardian to the Aegean activity, KFOR, and air policing over the Western Balkans. Through these efforts, Greece stands as both a frontline contributor and a reliable partner. Today, the threats we face are complex, whether from the east or the south, and demand coordinated responses. The security of one of us is the security of all of us. In this regard, the southern dimension of our security must not be overlooked. Energy security, maritime stability, irregular migration, and hybrid threats all require sustained alliance attention and engagement. We also welcome the alliance's renewed focus on defense investment, the capabilities. Greece, with traditionally high defense spending and a newly adopted 25 billion euros modernization program, is fully aligned with the goals of fair burden sharing and long-term readiness. Furthermore, Greece reaffirms its full support for Ukraine's sovereignty and Euro-Atlantic path. The establishment of the NATO-Ukraine Council and the launch of the multi-year defense and transition program mark a strategic evolution, which we strongly endorse. Finally, we believe that a more capable European defense pillar with complement, not compete with NATO. Enhanced NATO-EU cooperation, grounded in shared values and practical synergies, will serve the interest of all allies and strengthen transatlantic resilience. As we celebrate the Assembly's 70th anniversary, let us also look forward, reaffirming the role of parliaments as active agents of unity, legitimacy, and strategic foresight. Greece remains deeply committed to the mission and a NATO that is cohesive, credible, and democratically grounded. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I now invite Zsolt Nemet, Deputy Head of the Hungarian Delegation in the NATO Parliamentary Assembly.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, I would like to pass on to you, first of all, the greetings of Speaker László Kövér. Dear colleagues, the Hague Summit is close, and the challenge in front of us is to place NATO on track, again, strengthening our cohesion, strengthening our resilience, and our ability to maintain the high level of deterrence potential. And we also have to increase substantially our effectivity. These are very serious challenges in front of NATO. The European defense budgets have been mentioned by all of you. The 5%, yes, colleagues, is the buzzword to tackle. 5%. Let us get acquainted with these two words. Obviously, we need a new definition of defense-related expenses. And I think it will be a very important challenge for the Hague Summit. But also, we need to maintain our core undertakings concerning defense capabilities. What we cannot support Hungarians is the joint indebtedness by the European Union. We believe that Brussels should not exploit the defense challenge in front of us to centralize towards even more federalism the European Union. We are grateful to President Trump for the political pressure America exercises concerning the expenditure of the allies. The achieved 2% threshold we also owe to the United States of America. Otherwise, if that pressure wouldn't have taken place at the time, we wouldn't have achieved the results where we are now. Colleagues, economy is the next question I would like to tackle. Defense is business, and good investments are key to sustainability of our economies. It is our joint interest. Let me quote to you the second article of the Washington Treaty. They will seek to eliminate conflict in their international economic policies and will encourage economic collaboration between any or all of them. Yes, colleagues, we need to eliminate debates across the Atlantic and also the fundamental debates inside Europe. Both the transatlantic, the intra-European, and the interregional aspects are crucial. We need to have an equal distribution of economic opportunities. This is, in our opinion, the key question for the way forward, to make America and Europe great again. Dear colleagues, finally, I believe that if we are able to bring these deliberations, this will make NATO capable to influence war and peace in both hot conflicts around us, the East and the Middle East as well, peace through NATO. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Bryndís Haraldsdóttir, sorry for the Deputy Speaker of the Alþingi of Iceland.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, it is my pleasure to address you in this occasion celebrating our Assembly's 70th anniversary. Iceland has been represented from the outset of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly ever since the Conference of Members of Parliament from the NATO countries was held at the Palais du Charlotte in July 1955. Yesterday, we in Iceland celebrated 110 years of women's suffrage, and looking at old photos, I noticed there was not many women present at our first conference in Paris in 1955. In fact, only 2, from Denmark and the Netherlands. On that note, I would like to raise our attention to the UN Resolution 3025 on women, peace and security. Our great alliance must be the champions in fighting against gender-based violence as a tool of war, and have gender mainstreaming as a core principle in its policies and decisions. Iceland was a founding member of the alliance, and it is the only member without a standing military. But our geostrategic location during the Cold War was of immense importance. The Cold War came to an end and focus shifted elsewhere. But after a brief period of relief, Russia's aggression behavior from the invasion of Georgia in 2008, annexation of Crimea in 2014, and the culminating in the full-scale, unprovoked, brutal and illegal invasion in Ukraine in 2022 has completely changed the picture and affected the security and defense priorities of our ally. The importance of the transatlantic relations during these testing times cannot be overstated. Looking at the map, Iceland embodies the transatlantic link and has again become a key partner in the High North. Iceland is firmly committed to NATO's strengthened deterrence and defense postures and collective defense. Iceland focused on capabilities, infrastructure, and host nation support for allies to enhance situation and awareness and operation affected in the Arctic and the North Atlantic. A new defense policy for Iceland is currently being formulated with a robust input from Alþingi, the Parliament of Iceland, and we will always remain a committed and trustworthy ally, ready to shoulder increased responsibilities as we approach a historic NATO summit in The Hague next week. Dear colleagues, as the former Secretary General of NATO, Jatti Hopp-Scheffer, once wrote, our assembly is a vital link between NATO and the wider public. I wholeheartedly agree and would like to add that it is an ever more important pillar in parliamentary diplomacy. The NATO Parliamentary Assembly is more relevant than ever, and I would like to conclude by congratulating us all on that occasion, wishing the Assembly a prosperous future and urge us to show unwavering solidarity in the challenging times ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. I invite to address the summit Lorenzo Fontana, Speaker of the Chamber of Deputies of Italy. Mr. Fontana will speak in Italian.
Gentili colleghi.
Dear colleagues, thank you. From 1949, the Atlantic Alliance has represented the fundamental pillar of safety and security for our countries. This year, as you know, we're celebrating the 70th anniversary of its Parliamentary Assembly, which in these years has carried out a crucial role in facilitating dialogue and cohesion among its members. Transatlantic relations are an integral part of the political horizon in our countries. Today, more than ever, we must enhance the awareness that on it depends the future of a fair and lasting peace in the world. Our presence here in Brussels is testament to the willingness to strengthen this link even more, based on the previous meetings in Vilnius and Washington. It also establishes the right of national parliaments to express themselves in view of these summits and meetings of heads of state. In the days to come in The Hague, NATO will be called to prove its maturity. It will have to tackle the challenges of international security that today reach geopolitical scenarios and technological frontiers. In this context, member states are also called to deal with the various sharing of financial burdens for collective defense. Italy has always met with responsibilities the commitments that derive from its participation in the alliance. I'm thinking of the various geopolitical scenarios on the southern flank, the Eastern Front, and the Indo-Pacific. It is therefore necessary to adopt an approach that is in line with the new geostrategic vision that is promoted by the alliance. I trust that NATO, based on its history and the values that underpin it, will be capable of contributing it to a determining way in building a safer future. It is our common hope that the first step of this avenue may be the end of the conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine that continue to be a reason of deep worry, I would say, deepening worry, particularly for our citizens. We must therefore commit to build together a world in which balances are not defined by the use of force anymore, but by the ability to prevent wars and crises through deterrence that is essential, and to define peace thanks to international cooperation. Thank you for your attention.
We'll now take a brief coffee break and reconvene at 10:50. Sharp, please. Proceed through the doors on my right and follow the signage to the Salon de Lecture, where there will be served coffee and refreshments. Please be back to start at 10:50.
E se uso questo mi senti? Sì, però onestamente ti sento benissimo. Mi senti bene? Sì. E allora uso questo.
Test, 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 mi senti? Test, 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 can you hear me? Can you hear me? Test. No. You can't hear me? No. Test, 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 can you hear me? Can you hear me? Test, test. Sì. Test, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Test, test.
Can you please take your seats so that we can restart the session, please? I would like to invite Daiga Mierina, Speaker of the Saima of Latvia, to address the summit.
Dear colleagues, excellencies, we are living in a turbulent and jarring time. For more than 3 years, the aggressor has continued to ravage Ukraine. A week ago, the conflict in the Middle East resumed with renewed vigor. War is on the doorstep of the alliance's borders. Since its foundation, NATO has been an alliance of values and security. That is why, more than ever before, we, the allies, must mobilize to defend our democratic values and our security. We must grow stronger and be open to welcoming into our community new countries with a shared system of values and a substantial contribution to collective defense. First, the forthcoming NATO summit in The Hague must take decisive decisions on a substantial increase in defense spending. Moreover, defense spending must be increased as soon as possible. Latvia supports an increase in defense spending to at least 5% of GDP. Latvia has already allocated 3.7% of GDP to defense and security. Next year, we plan to increase this figure to 4.35% in order to move as quickly as possible towards the planned 5%. This would ensure the necessary resources for national security and defense, attain the capability targets set by NATO, and provide military support to Ukraine. Second, we need to strengthen our military industry. The transatlantic defense industry needs to significantly increase production while also keeping costs at a reasonable level. The allies must work together to remove any unnecessary bureaucratic obstacles to the development of the industry. Thirdly, it is absolutely clear that Russia is the greatest long-term threat to us all. Russia's aim is to destroy Ukrainian statehood and rebuild its illusory empire. This is a direct threat to both our physical security and our value system. We must not let this happen. Under the guise of peace talks, the aggressor is immorally continuing to bomb Ukrainian civilians and civilian infrastructure, despite efforts by the United States and other allies to stop the violence. Russia still shows no signs of wanting peace. On the contrary, it is clearly preparing for a summer offensive against Ukraine. Latvia will continue its unwavering support for Ukraine by allocating at least 0.25% of its GDP to military aid. We support Ukraine's membership to NATO and the EU. This would serve as the strongest security guarantee for Ukraine in the long term. Fourth, NATO is stronger if it works together with our global partners in the Indo-Pacific region, with whom we share democratic values and also a shared understanding of potential threats. We need to strengthen our cooperation with Australia, Japan, New Zealand, and the Republic of Korea at all levels. Joint training, exchange of experience, and also the military industry are the areas where cooperation needs to be strengthened already today. Dear colleagues, the Hague Summit will be crucial for long-term peace. This requires decisiveness and political will. The mathematics are clear. We need a 5% investment to safeguard the other 95% of our prosperity and democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite Saulius Skvernelis, Speaker of the Seimas of Lithuania, to address the summit.
Mr. President of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, fellow speakers of parliaments, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate that the NATO Parliamentary Summit initiated by the Lithuanian Parliament in 2023 continues and I hope will continue to exist in this format. I also wish to take this opportunity to invite you to Vilnius, Lithuania, where the spring session of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly will be held next year. Distinguished colleagues, I will be frank. We're at the crossroads between the democratic world and the reputation of our security alliance, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. First, Ukraine continues to fight against the Russian aggression despite suffering immense sacrifice and loss, fighting for our security. It has been 4 years now. Meanwhile, Russia is rejecting any idea of a peace plan, whether proposed by the Allies or Ukraine, or even imposed by itself. This is a typical Russian approach, manifested in practice: no to peace and yes to war. Therefore, I call for your full support for Ukraine and its Euro-Atlantic future. Second, we in Lithuania, unfortunately, as well as in other Baltic states, have bitter experience in our relations with Russia. The policy of pleasing the aggressor Russia has been the gravest mistake. Just to remind you, 3 decades ago it was Moldova and Georgia. In 2008 it was Georgia again. And in 2014 and 2022, it was Ukraine. The facts do not lie. Third, in the name of supposed peace, we cannot compromise on either the supremacy of international law or the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine and other countries. The Lithuanian Parliament has adopted a resolution stating that Lithuania does not and will never recognize de jure or de facto the territories of Ukraine temporarily occupied by Russia. I call on all other countries to follow suit. Fourth, Lithuania is spending 4% of its GDP on defense this year and will reach 5% next year. We support the goal of establishing increased funding for security at the NATO summit. In addition to funding, we also need political will to defend every inch of the territory of the alliance, every single one. Today, we are witnessing with concern the spread of authoritarian tendencies and methods of governance at NATO's borders. In the Middle East, we are observing yet another source of military escalation. Fellow speakers, distinguished colleagues, I wish to underline the importance of the declaration of the forthcoming NATO summit. It will serve as our joint message to Russia and other autocracies. We must invest in our unity as NATO by committing ourselves to 5% of GDP for defense funding, to supporting Ukraine, and ensuring the capabilities of rapid and effective response. To conclude, let me echo what Marco Rutte, NATO Secretary General, has recently said. We are all on the eastern flank now. There's no longer east or west. There's just NATO. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I invite to address the summit Claude Wissler, Speaker of the Chamber of Deputies of Luxembourg.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, despite countless efforts to open negotiations, despite persistent calls for ceasefire, a brutal war continues to rage in Ukraine at the very borders of our alliance. This war must end soon, and it must end with a just peace. The unlawful aggression in Ukraine is more than a sheer attack on a country. Ukraine's suffering is our test, a test of our solidarity, a test of our resolve, a test of our very reason as an alliance. Dear colleagues, NATO must be strong. Luxembourg stands ready to fulfill its part. It did so by adopting a new trajectory. Until the end of the year, we will have quadrupled our defense budget since 2021, reaching the 2% mark. We are aware that the new trajectory is not just a numerical goal. It is a strategic imperative and a serious commitment with the alliance. Yet we know this will not be enough. If a consensus on a stronger commitment was to emerge at the NATO summit in June, then we will be ready to fully accompany this dynamic as a reliable ally and partner. Our nation has demonstrated something remarkable by creating a broad national consensus on such a complex subject. This consensus matters because it extends beyond election cycles. It is also a strong signal sent to our allies and to all those who challenge security and peace in Europe. We have witnessed a paradigm shift. We know that we must further invest in peace. Otherwise, we risk paying a much higher price, that of our freedom and our independence. Luxembourg is relying on an economic strategy capable of sustaining its military effort, a strategy putting forward Luxembourg's assets in satellite communications and cybersecurity. Every day, our allies rely on satellite communication capabilities based on Luxembourgish expertise. It is in this spirit that the government has decided to launch a second military communication satellite. This summer, Luxembourg expanded capabilities with the launch of our first Earth observation satellite. These projects hold significant importance for the alliance and will serve the collective benefit of our allies. Furthermore, Luxembourg has decided to increase our aid to Ukraine. Beyond purely military aspects, we all have to think about resilience. Resilience of our societies, civil resilience in the face of all sorts of crises, cyber attacks, power cuts, pandemia, all pose a serious and sudden threat to the functioning of our societies. We cannot predict what future challenges will emerge, yet we know with certainty they will arise. Our obligation is clear. We must prepare and maintain readiness. We are doing it in Luxembourg, and we strongly support the initiative at the NATO headquarters. Our goal is just a singular one: protect freedom and democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now invite to address the summit Dragan Kovacki, head of the delegation of North Macedonia at the NATO PA.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished presidents of national parliaments and heads of delegations, dear delegates, ambassadors, friends. As we mark 70 years of NATO Parliamentary Assembly as a pillar democratic dialogue in our alliance, let's remind ourselves that NATO is not only a military alliance, but a living community of democratic nations. Over the decades, our parliaments have worked to ensure transparency, accountability, and that the voice of our people is heard. For my country, the path to NATO was long and sometimes uncertain, but always guided by conviction, reform, and the belief in a shared Euro-Atlantic future. Our accession 5 years ago was a powerful affirmation of that choice. Our parliament played a key role, passing challenging reforms, building consensus, and reinforcing civilian oversight. Today, we continue that mission, ensuring our institutions support both national security and regional stability. As a country from Southeast Europe, our voice is shaped by resilience and transformation. We are proof that NATO's door remains open and that democracy is the path to peace. In today's world of disinformation, instability, and conflict, the role of our parliaments is to defend truth and make sure NATO's choices reflect the democratic will of our nations. Ahead of the NATO summit, let us stand united on the principles that define us: solidarity, accountability, and collective defense. Dear friends, freedom demands sacrifices. To secure our future, let's urge and support our governments to allocate 5% of GDP to defense and defense-related infrastructure.
This isn't just about strength, it's about ensuring lasting security and prosperity for our citizens. My country remains fully committed, not only as a beneficiary, but as a responsible, reliable ally. Finally, I welcome the NATO PA's focus on the Western Balkans this year. I urge all of you to continue investing in the region through future memberships and cooperation initiatives. This is the only true path to lasting peace and security. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite Duško Stepjović, the head of the Montenegrin delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, to address the summit.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor. Honorable speakers and presidents of the parliaments, dear colleagues, it is with great honor that I address you today on behalf of Montenegro at this historic NATO Parliamentary Summit in Brussels. Marking the 70th anniversary of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, our gathering today stands as a powerful reminder of the enduring strength of our alliance and the vital role that parliamentary diplomacy has played in shaping transatlantic unity over the past 7 decades. Montenegro remains firmly committed to the NATO alliance, continuously working to enhance the capabilities of our armed forces and ensure alignment with the highest standards of collective defense. We stand in full solidarity with Ukraine as part of a broader commitment to defend the fundamental values that define our alliance. At the same time, Montenegro is strengthening its position as a credible contributor to global defense efforts, advancing cooperation and offering capabilities that support the resilience and readiness of NATO and its partners. Our efforts extend beyond military readiness. Montenegro is actively fostering interoperability through joint exercises, training programs, and strategic cooperation with allied nations. We remain dedicated to reinforcing NATO's deterrence posture and to addressing emerging threats in a comprehensive and coordinated manner. Dear colleagues, as we face growing global instability, this summit serves as a crucial platform to reaffirm the value of dialogue, unity, and foresight. In today's world marked by persistent conflicts and uncertainty, we must strive for peace by preparing for defense. The presence of esteemed parliamentary leaders from all 32 NATO allies adds depth and purpose to our discussions. Your insights are key to shaping a resilient and responsive alliance that reflects the will and voice of our citizens. The city we are in today imposes on me the obligation to point out that Montenegro will fulfill an ambitious but realistic goal. By 2028, we will become the first next member of the European Union. This will additionally strengthen partnership within the NATO alliance. And this is precisely one of the reasons why we believe that neither the European Union nor NATO can be complete stories without the entire Balkans. In conclusion, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to each and every one of you for your continued commitment to our common cause. In that sense, I look forward to deepening our cooperation and advancing the values that bind us. I thank you all.
Thank you. I now invite Kari Eriksen, Vice President of the Storting of Norway, to address the summit.
Thank you, and dear colleagues and ladies and gentlemen. As we approach the NATO summit in The Hague next week, Norway's message is clear. We stand united with our allies, we are committed to our shared security, and we are ready to take greater responsibility in an increasingly uncertain world. Russia's brutal war against Ukraine has reshaped our understanding of defense and deterrence. It reminds us that peace cannot be taken for granted and that freedom must be actively defended. Norway has responded with both words and action. Through the Nansen Support Program, running until 2030, we are providing long-term military and civilian support to Ukraine. In 2025 alone, we will contribute at least 7.3 billion euros, around 85% of which will be military aid. We are also strengthening our own defences. Last year, all parties in our parliament united behind a new long-term defence plan, representing a historic investment in our armed forces. Including military support to Ukraine, we will likely spend 3.3% of our GDP on defence in 2025. And today, almost as we speak, our Prime Minister, Jonas Gahr Støre, confirms that Norway supports Secretary General Rutte's goal of 5% for defence, and I reckon this will be united by the Parliament's support. Norway will work to strengthen NATO's deterrence posture and emphasize transatlantic unity. Europe must take greater responsibility for its own defense, but we are always stronger when Europe and North America stand together. Ukraine's future is tied to ours and to European security. We therefore advocate long-term coordinated support to Ukraine. As Russia shows weakness on multiple fronts, we have a unique opportunity to turn the tide if we act with determination. Dear colleagues, let us unite in the values on which NATO was built, to secure peace and a better future for children and people living in Ukraine and Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite Jan Anthony Brun, President of the Senate of the States General of the Netherlands.
Dear colleagues, how wonderful it is to meet you here in Belgium, and thank you to our wonderful hosts from the Belgian Parliament. Merci. One of the most illustrious ministers of foreign affairs of the Netherlands was Max van der Stoel. Early in his political career, Mr. van der Stoel was a member of the Dutch Senate. In 1961, he took the floor during a debate on the defense budget. 1961. Van der Stoel warned against the expensive nature of the Soviet Union and its allies. He also expressed his worries about the growing anti-NATO sentiment in the Netherlands. Finally, he called upon the Dutch government to defend the credibility of the alliance. And here we are 64 years later. The topics mentioned by Mr. van der Stoel have unfortunately never been as urgent as they are today. The war in Ukraine has shocked us all. Europe is now at the heart of brutal aggression. The day after Russia invaded Ukraine, NATO activated its NATO response force for the first time. Thousands of troops are now on the ground in NATO member states in the east of Europe. Finland and Sweden, after so many years of neutrality, have joined the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The need for mutual defense and cooperation is once again at the heart of all NATO member states and our parliaments. As Max van der Stoel was convinced, NATO is once again, in the eyes of many people, an indispensable tool in the defense of freedom. In this respect, the NATO Parliamentary Assembly is pivotal because parliamentary scrutiny in matters of war and peace is of the utmost importance. Former parliamentarians from the Netherlands, such as Bert Koenders, who was president of NATO PA in 2006 and 2007, and Angelien IJsink, Frank van Kappen and Henk-Jan Ormel have served as vice presidents of the Assembly, helping shape of what it has become today, a parliamentary forum grounded in freedom, security and solidarity. Proof that the NATO PA is as important today as it was 70 years ago. Dear colleagues, next week the Netherlands, my country, will host the NATO summit in The Hague, home to the Dutch Senate and House of Representatives. We look forward to hosting the delegations, and it will be our honor to do so. The Dutch have long recognized that defense is not only a matter of bunkers and battalions, but of laws, values and legitimacy. Just this week, the House of Representatives of the Netherlands gave the green light to the Dutch government to agree to the 5% standard during the NATO summit. In a world marked by uncertainty, it is our shared commitment to freedom, solidarity and parliamentary dialogue that anchors us. As we mark 70 years of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, let us look ahead with confidence and resolve. For freedom must be defended not only with force, but with words, with principles and with parliaments. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite Joanna Rostowska, the head of the Polish delegation to the NATO PA.
Distinguished President, dear colleagues, there is no doubt that the Russian war against Ukraine is shaping NATO, present and future. The threat is not only military. Russia is attacking NATO countries through cyber operation, disinformation, sabotage and political influence. And this is the real life. Ruslan Stefaniuk said that the Eastern Flank is that the Ukraine is a Eastern flank. My colleague from Lithuania reminded the words of Mark Rutte about the Eastern flank, and we have no doubt that there is not such thing as a safe zone. Is not safe zone in Europe now. This is the reason, because the flight distance, flight time from Warsaw to Madrid, for example, for modern missiles, it's about 5 minutes. And I have no doubt this is not a safe zone, and we need to prepare all countries in Europe. We need to prepare to the future war. And this is why I will come to the concrete steps from the key allies like United Kingdom, where Prime Minister recently announced strategic defense review. Thank you very much. Baltic countries do a lot. Thank you very much. New members of NATO do a lot, Finland and Sweden. And Poland is also doing its homework. This year we are spending nearly 5% of our GDP. This is the highest in NATO. We are modernizing our army, buying new equipment, etc., etc. And when I was thinking about the future war, I didn't suspect that the Russian war in Ukraine would be mixed First, Second, and the Third World War with trench warfare, yes. But now, when we are see what happened during the conflict Israel-Iran, I think that this is this kind of war which I can imagine. And in my opinion, it's the big question, what kind of war is NATO supposed to prepare for? regardless of what type of armament we use, first of all, we must correctly describe the expected efforts of the operation, which in turn will determine how we will recognize the enemy and define the targets of the attack. There is a clear need to combine intelligence capabilities, the rise of secure exchange of information to a new level in order to be able to effectively conduct the process of analysis, integration, and targeting. This is a task to perform by the Spatial Service of the NATO countries, image signal reconnaissance of the cyber defense units. Today, it's a component of the armed forces of the NATO countries must be carried out its activities of a full scale. Finally, let's be clear. NATO has two fundamental tasks today. We must do everything to be ready for an armed conflict on NATO territory in the short term and to continue to support Ukraine politically, economically, and militarily. Peace will only be real if it's just and fair and respect Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, sending a clear message. No reward for aggressor, no punishment for a victim. Ukraine plays in NATO, and our job is to make sure the path remains open, irreversible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would now like to invite José Pedro Aguiar Branco, Speaker of the Assembly of the Republic of Portugal, to address the summit.
Mr. President, dear Marcos, dear friend, a special thanks for your leadership. Speakers and members of Parliament, experts say number 7 is indicative of a feeling of introspection and search for authenticity. 7 decades of NATO's Parliamentary Assembly also call us to a brief introspection on the legacy of this important organization. First, it contributed to increase the general knowledge on the alliance amongst MPs, and through them, amongst the citizens they represent. In a sense, it worked towards the democratization of NATO itself and its general acceptance. Second, it also provides the tools parliaments needed to put into practice their own competences on defense-related issues. We've seen it in general debates on defense and security. We've seen it in measures concerning the democratic control of the armed forces. Lastly, PA NATO has been playing an important role in support for the transatlantic link. This is a legacy we cannot lose, because there is no alternative to NATO. It is our guarantee of a life of freedom, stability, security, democracy, and respect for human rights. We need NATO, a strong and more capable NATO, with a more balanced share of responsibilities between the Atlantic shores. And that is why the Parliamentary Assembly is also so important. Even more important when there must be no hesitation condemning Russia for the aggression of Ukraine, for the disrespect for human rights, for the sovereignty and international law violations. Let us be clear, there is no peace at all costs. A role also even more important when conflicts nearby are escalating very quickly and no one knows how things will evolve. Israel, Iran. And when humanitarian crises keep multiplying and intensifying, like Gaza and Sudan. It is urgent to reinforce the alliance capacities and to encourage governments to increase defense budgets. We believe that the Hague Summit will set the tone. But let us never forget that the process doesn't end there. It continues in our capitals, in our parliaments, with budget discussions, with policy discussions. National parliaments are important to explain the reasons, the context, the advantages of increasing defense expenses, and also to obtain the necessary political consensus, as well as to create, along with the NATO PA, a sense of ownership. Let us cherish the legacy of this Assembly and reinforce its role in these challenging times. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now invite Miloš Vystrčil, President of the Senate of the Czech Republic, to address the summit.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, a strong transatlantic alliance is vitally important for Europe and the United States and other allies. Our resilience and defense capabilities depend on cooperation. Isolation would be a serious mistake for all. At the same time, Europe must do more to strengthen our collective resilience and defense. Europe must shoulder greater responsibility and truly revise its thinking and behavior. This means accepting and implementing substantial changes. Firstly, to increase defense spending and achieve our capability targets. Continued support for Ukraine must be part of this. They are fighting for the freedom of all of Europe, and they have also become a leader in defense capabilities. Secondly, we must gradually get rid of dependencies in strategic products, materials, or technologies from undemocratic countries. Tanks and drones can never replace medicines or microchips. Thirdly, we need to increase our competitiveness and stop living in debt. If we fail to do so, we risk a fundamental drop in the quality of life of our citizens. The Czech Republic is ready to take a responsible and firm stance as an ally. We trust that allies in Europe and across the Atlantic are also ready to accept the new reality and get to work. And we do believe that the outcome of the upcoming NATO summit in The Hague will reflect it. Thank you.
Thank you. I invite Markéta Pekarová-Adamová, Speaker of the Chamber of Deputies of the Czech Republic.
Dear colleagues, I would like to thank to our Belgian hosts and of course the NATO Parliamentary Assembly for hosting this important meeting. The upcoming summit in The Hague will be a historical one. It is thus important that parliaments play an appropriate role. Czechia fully subscribes to the summit goals. demonstrating unity, commitment to a fairer burden sharing, ramping up of the defense industry, and stepping up support to Ukraine. These goals should be framed by a shared perception of Russia as a long-term, the most serious and direct threat to the Euro-Atlantic area. It is the Russian threat that is the main driving force of NATO's continuous adaptation. It is because of Russia that we need to radically increase our defense spending. Czechia has already committed to 3% of GDP on defense by 2030. We are prepared to join the emerging consensus of the new defense spending plan of 5% of defense and defense-related investments. Well-armed Ukraine is also our own best forward defense. Europeans have to take a larger share in supporting Ukraine. Czechia will continue doing its part, including through the ammunition initiative, training, and the contributions to NATO instruments, as well as through its participation in the coalition of the willing. Last year, we delivered and facilitated deliveries of 1.5 million rounds of large caliber ammunition to Ukraine. This year, in 2025, we aim to deliver even more. Czechia welcomes that NATO is addressing the growing challenges of China. We are concerned with China supporting the Russian economy and becoming a decisive enabler of Russia's war of aggression. Chinese sustained malicious cyber and hybrid activities, including disinformation, undermine NATO's interests. We appreciate the recent NATO statement of solidarity concerning Chinese cyber activities against our country. The Euro-Atlantic and Indo-Pacific security are interconnected. Czech Republic welcomes NATO's growing cooperation with Indo-Pacific partners. Dear colleagues, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I now invite Judith Cummins, Deputy Speaker of the House of the Commons of the United Kingdom.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, and fellow speakers, it's a great honour to be here today to speak on behalf of Sir Lindsay Hoyle, Speaker of the House of Commons, at this special 70th anniversary celebration of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. For 76 years, NATO has kept us safe and prosperous, united by a common history and shared values, and a testament to the enduring power of collective security to deter aggression. As Winston Churchill stated during a speech in 1952, NATO was the surest guarantee not only of the prevention of war, but of victory should our hopes be blasted. As we commemorate 80 years since the end of the Second World War, with victory in Europe and over Japan, and today with global tensions running high, especially in Ukraine and the Middle East, Churchill's sentiment that strong alliances are required for victory in war and stability in peace has never been more important. In the 70 years since the NATO Assembly was formed, the world has changed. The threat we now face is more serious and less predictable than at any time since the Cold War. We face war in Europe, growing Russian aggression, new nuclear risks, and daily cyber attacks at home. Our adversaries are working more in alliance with one another, while technology is changing how war is fought. Drones now kill more people than traditional artillery in the war in Ukraine. And whoever gets new technology into the hands of their armed forces the quickest will have the advantage. That is why we in NATO need each other. We are meeting here just 4 days before the Hague summit. This summit needs to agree a historic new defence investment pledge. It must leave our adversaries in no doubt about our strength and our resolve. These are not easy decisions, but they are the right decisions, and the UK will play its full part. That is why the UK Prime Minister has launched a strategic defence review to move the country to warfighting readiness, learning the lessons from Ukraine by harnessing drones, data and digital warfare to make our armed forces stronger and more lethal. In the UK, we remain determined to put Ukraine into the strongest possible position on the battlefield and at the negotiating table. The Hague Summit should send a strong message on this too. At the parliamentary level, the use of the Speaker's soft power is also important. Mr. Speaker has met formally with the Speakers of 15 NATO countries, together with Ruslan Stefanchuk, President of the Ukrainian Parliament, Verkhovna Rada. Common Speaker Sir Lindsay Hoyle has championed the democratic rights of Ukraine at recent G7 and G20 forums. In March this year, that show of solidarity was evident once again, when Ukrainian President Zelensky and Mr. Stefanchuk called on speakers across Europe and beyond to join them at a special ceremony to commemorate 3 years since the horrific mass murder of hundreds of Ukrainian civilians and prisoners of war in Bucha. Just as at the NATO level, we work best when we are aligned. From the human standpoint, we work best when we work together too, for the common good and in support of each other. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite Janez Čakeli, the head of the Slovenian delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, to address the summit. Janez.
President, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the security environment around us is changing rapidly and not for the better. As partners in a collective defense community, we are witnessing growing instability, ever partners in a collective defense, ever more complex threats, and increasingly assertive adversaries who seek to challenge the rule-based international order. To remain credible, our defense and deterrence must evolve. That means adapting more quickly, responding with greater unity, and strengthening our capacity to protect one another. Recent discussions within the alliance confirm a shared understanding we must be ready not only for defense, but also for resilience. A key part of this readiness is developing new military capabilities, not in theory, but in practical operational terms. Slovenia has recently adopted a national defense resolution outlining a comprehensive approach to national security. It includes reinforcing the defense industry and resilience projects with dual-use applications, as well as a plan to re-establish territorial-style reserve forces. However, such efforts require a sustainable increase in investment. Defense and security are not costs to manage, they are foundations of our freedom and stability. Slovenia is increasing its defense spending in line with its national plan, targeting 2% of GDP this year and a gradual rise to 3% by 2030. The ambition now is to move beyond minimal commitments to a level of investment that matches the reality we face. This includes not just core defense spending, but also broader investment in mobility, infrastructure, and defense industry capacity. This requires predictability, political will, and smart cooperation across sectors. Strengthening the defense industrial base is also an opportunity for innovation, for employment, and for national economies. Dear colleagues, alongside these efforts, we must stand firm in our support to Ukraine. Ensuring Ukraine has the means to defend itself, innovate its defense production, and work toward a just peace is a moral imperative. This support should never come at the expense of our own readiness. It must go hand in hand. Today's challenges call for solidarity, responsibility, and strategic clarity. Our credibility depends on our ability to match words with action, and our unity remains our greatest deterrent. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite Kerstin Lundgren, Deputy Speaker of the Riksdag of Sweden.
Thank you, Mr. President, and the President of the Belgian Senate, dear colleagues, Excellencies. I'm honored to have this opportunity to address the NATO Parliamentary Assembly on behalf of the Speaker of the Swedish Parliament, the Riksdag, on this event to commemorate the Assembly's 70th anniversary. The Riksdag became an associated member of the Assembly in 2003, a member last year. Sweden's ambition to be an active and reliable partner applies to both the NATO Parliamentary Assembly and NATO. NATO is an alliance based on the conviction that democracy, human rights, a rule-based world order, and free trade are not only grand ideals, but also practices that make us all stronger. Today, this belief is challenged. This is why I welcome initiatives such as the establishment of a Center for Democratic Resilience at the NATO headquarters. The Swedish battalion at NATO's multinational brigade in Latvia, stationed at Camp Valdemar, has this spring been the Swedish Army's first deployment within the framework of NATO. A united Riksdag stands behind the deployment, which will contribute to NATO's collective deterrence and defense of the North Atlantic area. Sweden contributes with a strong defense capability and a strong defense industry. This year, our defense expenditure is at 2.4% of GDP, and I'm happy to inform you all that yesterday, all 8 political parties in the parliament agreed to set the new goal for total defense to reach 5% 2030, and military or defense spending 3.5%. And of course, we are fully aware of the Russians' long-term threat to all of us, not only the neighbors, to all of us. Our support for Ukraine stands strong and united, and that goes for now 19 packages that we have given to Ukraine and more to come. Our support is, of course, also a fight for democracy and human rights throughout Europe and throughout the transatlantic area. It is therefore vital that we as members of the alliance increase diplomatic, military, financial and humanitarian support for Ukraine, not only in words, dear colleagues, but also in deeds. Thank you and congratulations to all of us.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Nomart Kultulmuş, Speaker of the Grand National Assembly of Turkey, to address the summit.
Mr. Chairman, honorable speakers, dear colleagues, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the Belgian Parliament for hosting this summit. Our Assembly, NATO PA, has upheld the values of democracy and liberty, as well as the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity since its inception 70 years ago. These values and principles are the basis of our support for Ukraine. While standing for Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity, including Crimea, we have also remained at the forefront of the diplomatic efforts for achieving a just and lasting peace in the course of ongoing war. Dear friends, our values and principles which guide us on Ukraine must also apply to Palestine. The Allies' weak response to the genocidal campaign in Gaza undermines NATO's credibility in the eyes of the regional partners. It also reinforces the perception that the West is acting with double standards. Israel's ongoing occupation and aggression in Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, constitute a total disregard of international law. Nothing can justify commission of serious crimes. Perpetrators must be held accountable. We therefore welcome recent statements and sanctions of some allied and partners' governments against Netanyahu government. Dear colleagues, we should also redouble our efforts in the parliamentary diplomacy area. In that respect, some national parliaments established on 18th of April this year in Istanbul, the group of parliaments in support of Palestine. I invite parliaments that support the two-state solution in the region and the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people to join our initiative. Following Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Israel now is attacking Iran in violation of international law. Israeli aggression in the region must end, and negotiations and diplomacy must resume. Dear friends, a just and lasting peace requires effective military deterrence, but also a stronger commitment to our values and principles. Therefore, NATO must further strengthen its perspective of peace and justice as wars and crises encircled our alliance's neighborhood. Finally, I would like to underline the fact that covenants without sword are only words and have no power to secure the world. On the other hand, without rules and principles, however, the sword becomes an instrument of unchecked power and despotism. Ukraine and Palestine will serve as a test of whether rules and principles or brute force will ultimately prevail. Thank you for you.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Elisa Spiropali, Speaker of the Assembly of Republic of Albania, to address the summit.
Dear Mr. President, dear Presidents of Parliament, dear Members of Parliament, colleagues, it is both an honor and a privilege to address this distinguished Assembly on behalf of the Parliament of the Republic of Albania. I extend my gratitude to our hosts and the NATO Parliamentary Assembly for convening this important session at a critical juncture in our collective security journey, just a few days before a crucial NATO summit in The Hague. NATO remains the cornerstone of our transatlantic security and a living testament to the power of shared values: democracy, the rule of law, individual liberty, and collective defense. Albania is proud to stand firm in this alliance, not only as a member, but as a committed contributor to its vision and mission. We meet today under the shadow of significant geopolitical turbulence. Russia's unprovoked and illegal war of aggression against Ukraine continues to undermine the very foundations of the rules-based international order. As parliamentarians, as Democrats, and as allies, we cannot and must not remain passive observers. Albania has condemned this aggression unequivocally and has joined all NATO and EU measures in solidarity with Ukraine, including sanctions, military assistance and humanitarian support. I was personally honored to participate just a few days ago at the Ukraine Southeast Europe Summit in Odessa to reiterate once more our full and unreserved support to Ukraine, but also to take stock of the difficult reality of life under constant threat, and join President Zelensky and other leaders in the call for immediate stop to the war, this brutal war in fact, and for a meaningful process leading to a just and sustainable peace. Colleagues, as if the world had not seen enough troubles during the last years, the recent military escalation between Iran and Israel only exacerbates a rule-based world order under severe stress. We call on Iran to cease its nuclear and ballistic missile activities and to act in accordance with its obligations under international law, including the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation and Nuclear Weapons. A world spinning out of control requires us to remain very vigilant on all fronts, including in our own area. In the Western Balkans, malign influences persist in their efforts to destabilize democratic institutions, incite divisions, and undermine Euro-Atlantic inspirations. Albania strongly believes that the security of the Western Balkans is inseparable from the security of Europe and the broader NATO area. We call upon our allies and partners to maintain robust engagement both politically and militarily in our region. Since admission in 2009, Albania has consistently demonstrated its commitment to alliance and steadfast dedication to collective security through political, operational, and financial contributions. Our government has significantly increased defense spending, has already reached the 2% GDP target in line with the alliance burden-sharing goals. We support the new defense investment pledge, 3.5% for core defense and 1.5% for other security-related areas, a critical instrument in demonstrating our shared commitment to NATO's credibility and collective deterrence for the future. In this vein, we will continue to modernize our armed forces, enhance interoperability, and hosting key NATO infrastructure, including the transformation of Puchova Air Base into a strategic hub for alliance in the Western Balkans. But security in the 21st century goes far beyond tanks and troops. Hybrid threats, disinformation campaigns, cyber attacks, and the weaponization of energy and migration demand a holistic response. Our parliaments have a central role to play in legislation, in oversight, and in public discourse. In Albania, we're strengthening institutional resilience, investing in cybersecurity, and working to counter malign narratives that seek to exploit social and political fault lines. We also firmly believe that our security is intertwined with the advancement of democratic institutions, human rights, and economic opportunities. A resilient democracy is the best defense against external subversion. That is why Albania supports NATO's partnership with like-minded nations from the Western Balkans to the Indo-Pacific and the continued enlargement of our alliance. We have strongly supported and welcomed the accession of Finland and Sweden, and we support the aspirations of other qualified partners seeking NATO membership. Enlargement strengthens us all, and this is why we continue to strongly support the Alliance open door policy. Distinguished colleagues, as legislators, we bear a unique responsibility. Our role is not limited to appropriating defense budgets or ratifying treaties. We are the democratic guardians of our nation's security choices. We are the bridge between our armed forces and our citizens. We must ensure that NATO's mission is not only defended on the battlefield, but also explained, understood, and supported at home. Let us use this assembly not only as a platform for dialogue, but as a catalyst for coordinated action. Let us exchange best practices and how to protect democratic processes, counter terrorism, and empower our citizens with facts, not fear. Looking ahead, Albania supports a forward leading NATO, politically united, militarily strong, and strategically agile. We must invest in emerging technologies, enhance our ability to project stability beyond our borders, and uphold the principles that an attack against one is an attack against all. Our unity remains our greatest strength. Let us not take it for granted. In an age of rapid change and persistent threat, NATO must remain not just relevant, but indispensable. Albania stands ready to do its part with resolve, with responsibility, and with respect for the values that bind us together. In this spirit and with this resolve, we are happy and honored to host in Tirana, 2 years from now, in 2027, the first ever NATO summit in our region. This decision is not only showcasing our commitment to regional stability, unity, and cooperation, but translates also the strategic importance of NATO's enduring commitment to the Western Balkans. In closing, allow me to reiterate the commitment of the Albanian Parliament to the principles and objectives of this Assembly. We stand together in dialogue, in defense, and in determination for a better and more secure world for us and for all our people. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite Omid Nuripur, Deputy Speaker of the German Bundestag, to address the summit.
Allow me to start with a brief personal remark of mine. I, as a person who has been born and grew up in Iran, of course, I'm concerned of the security of my people there. And of course, I do not agree with any single measure of the Israeli government. But I absolutely agree with the concern of the Israeli people being surrounded by hostile actors, and of course the concern of having a regime in their neighborhood announcing for 45 years now that they want to erase Israel out of the map, getting the nuclear bomb. Ladies and gentlemen, for centuries, the so-called Polish question was key to peace in Europe and also a symbol for the fight and the battle of nations for self-determination. And our Polish friends still are role models for us, for all of the people who are seeking freedom. In the 22nd century, this question has been replaced by Ukrainian. And Ukrainian people are now those who are fighting for self-determination, and the peace in Ukraine going to be peace for Europe. There won't be peace in Europe without peace in Ukraine. This is why we have to stand with our friends in Ukraine. And this is why we have to break this binary rhetoric of diplomacy or arms being delivered and military support for the Ukrainian people. And this is what we're doing. There won't be peace without Ukrainian people being capable to defend themselves, and there won't be peace without Kremlin losing faith of a military, in a military victory. This is what we have to stand with them. And also because they are fighting for our freedom in Europe and for our security and for peace in Europe. Having said this, of course, we have a lot of common and own homeworks also. My country, Germany, is stepping up, and we are speeding up on this. And this is not only a contribution to deterrence in the eastern flank with our standing armored brigade now in Lithuania. We are very happy with that we can arrange it together. It's also that we have recently changed our constitution, so we are prepared for significantly higher defense budget and defense spendings, because it's obviously necessary. But of course, we know that we all have to strengthen and deepen our military cooperation in the very next future. We created an alliance which is the mightiest in history of mankind. And the reason for that is first, the military strength, and the second, that we are democracies. So it's absolutely necessary to remind ourselves and remind our people that the core of this alliance is democracy and the values we are sharing. And it's absolutely necessary to be happy with that. And I'm very happy that we have the honor to receive all of you in November 26th in Germany for the PA for the Assembly of the Parliamentarians of NATO there. And it's absolutely necessary that we always remind ourselves and our people and our public that the parliaments are the core of democracies, which are giving regulation to armed forces and are deciding the budget. And this is why we are a strong alliance, which is beneficiary to all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to thank you all once again for participating in this important parliamentary summit and for joining in the celebration of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly 70th anniversary. Special thanks to President De Rouver and Blondel, merci, et Vincent, for hosting us in the Belgian Parliament. Our hosts are now inviting us for a lunch reception in the Senate dining room, where we will also cut the anniversary cake. Before, I would like to ask the red card holders, only the red card holders, please, to join a family photo in the corner on the stairs outside the main entrance. And then we go from there to lunch. And with this, I declare the summit closed. Thank you.